Welcome to Newsbreak. We're broadcasting live right here in Jackson, Mississippi from the We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. We're being seen in over 139 countries and throughout the entire world. We're being seen live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. Now you can call in and join the show at 800-492-5186. You can call that same number for advertising opportunities. Now we're broadcasting in an African-American owned broadcast studio, bringing you relevant news about what's going on in the African-American community. You know, many folk try to tell our story and change the narrative as they see fit. That's what happened with our history and why we know so very little about it. Because we don't control the narrative and we don't share our own stories. So if you're looking to share a relevant, important story that occurred to you and your family from your legacy and from your history, then call us at 800-492-5186, and we'll get you on with your very own podcast show. The prices are very, very affordable. A 30-minute pre-recorded show is only $50 a month for 2 shows. $50 per month. You can't beat that. Our advertising spots, 30-second spots, are at $10 each. For 15, minimum of 15, that's $150 a week for 15 commercials that are running and being seen all over the world. Now, normally at this time, I would have my co-host with me, Chris Young. He's still vacationing up in the Virginia area, and I understand that he'll be back to Mississippi ready to go and continue on this great work as soon as he returns. Chris, we're looking forward to your return. I want to send out a shout out to my sister Ethel out in Sacramento, California. And as always, want you to know that I think about you every day and we love you so much, and you meant so much to this family as the matriarch of this Garrett clan. Hope you're having a wonderful day. And so our many sponsors and our programs that you can find here on a very popular show is The Buffet with Tony Yarber, the ex-mayor of the city of Jackson. It's an excellent show sharing relevant information that you will find very, very useful. Real Spill, our own sports show that airs on 7 o'clock on Mondays. Young men are talking about what's happening in sports in the world today. And we're very excited about sports now because this is the very beginning of our football season. And there are high expectations in Jackson, Mississippi. You know, many of you across the world know by now that Deion Sanders is the head coach of the Jackson State University Tigers. He came in and took over a program, I believe, that had not had a winning season in several years. And in his second year, he led that program to the championship game in Atlanta. SWAC champions and played for the national championship. That just tells you what one man can do, how one man can change a program that's got a vision and a commitment to excellence, and how he's able to get others to buy into his dream. We salute Coach Sanders and hope that he have a marvelous season coming up. His opening game, I believe, is in September 3rd, I believe, down in Miami against the Florida A&M Rattlers. Now, that's going to be a tough game. That's a tough way to open the season. It's very, very competitive programs. And the bands will just be out of sight. 2 of the best bands in the whole country, Florida A&M and the Jackson State Tigers. Also, I have to send a shout out to my alma mater down at Alcorn State University, Coach McNair. Had a disappointing season last year, but having dominated the SWAC for the past years prior to last year, with a six-peat, I believe. That's unimaginable. So Coach McNair is looking forward to getting back into his winning ways and bringing that program back to the position of dominance that he had enjoyed for so many seasons. We wish him well as an endeavor to return Alcorn State to the championship game and win the SWAC. Now, let's move into news. As you know, the news of the day that's getting everybody's attention and focus is the raid of the former president's home. He calls it a raid. The Congress calls it a legal search warrant, where they went in and discovered that there were documents there that were so sensitive until they could only be opened in a secure place. And yet the president had those documents in his possession. Now, I'll remind you how ugly it was during the first election with our former President Trump running against Hillary Clinton. And my heart goes out to her today because she had every expectation that she would be the president of these United States of America and was prepared to break that glass ceiling where no woman has ever gone, and had all of the graffiti and all of the things that you have, balloons to celebrate that victory, and it was not to be. It was a surprise upset by many, and it was a hard-fought contest, and there were some ugly rumors going around from the Trump administration that said that she had mismanaged her emails and that she was in fact a criminal, and the chant was, "Lock her up." We ought to lock her up. You could hear that throughout the Republican Party. It resonated with that group, and they wanted Hillary Clinton locked up for the mishandling of her server with emails on it. And yet now the former president finds himself in a very similar position with classified documents, much more serious than anything that was found on Hillary's server. And the chant for him now is indict him. The words are going out throughout the Congress and throughout the country from the Democratic Party that this president needs to be indicted. And he probably will be indicted based upon the fact that in this country you can indict a ham sandwich. So we look forward to seeing exactly how this is going to play out on the national scene. In the meantime, the January 6th committee, the January 6th incident that happened in America, and the committee now that's investigating that, chaired by our very own Congressman, Benny G. Thompson from Bolton, Mississippi, an individual that has risen from low standings in terms of being born in Mississippi and in Bolton. Not very much was going on in that area, and not much goes on there today. But this gentleman became mayor of Bolton, and then he became supervisor of the Hinds County Board of Supervisors, and then he became a United States congressman. He became a congressman after our very own Mike Espy, who had been the first African-American congressman since Reconstruction, got promoted under the Bill Clinton presidency to the position of the Secretary of Agriculture. My, how Mississippi promotes and provides leaderships throughout this country in so many, many different ways. Mike Espy, Secretary of Agriculture. Benny Thompson then became the congressman, the 2nd Congressional District for the state of Mississippi. And Congressman Thompson now has risen to a position of power where he has chaired Homeland Security, and now he chairs the January 6th committee that's investigating the riot that took place during the scaling of the wall in Washington, D.C., where more than one person lost their lives. Some difficult work ahead on the national scene. Here in Mississippi, we're watching it very closely, and we're praying for our congressman, knowing that he must be under tight security and that his life and his work is being threatened every day. When we hear about the numerous individuals in the Justice Department that are being threatened by the strong base of former President Trump, well, they are members of the Justice Department, and their families are now receiving threats. And so this is serious work. This is difficult work. This work requires a lot of sacrifice, and you have to put it all on the line. Just imagine that you chair the committee that is looking into the dealings of the former president who is now facing being indicted, and just think of what would happen if, in fact, he does get indicted and ultimately does get convicted. America would be challenged like it's never been challenged before. We see the rise of hate groups throughout this country. We see so much rhetoric going on the airways and in the news media today that is frightening for all. On a local radio show here in Jackson, Mississippi, specifically the Kim Waite Show, who calls himself the Radio Strongman, has always advocated that his collective group, which consists of Christian patriots, rednecks, etc. He's got a third one he calls Christian patriots, rednecks, and conservatives, that they ought to arm themselves and be ready to lock and load and defend their constitutional right and their conservative beliefs. They are very afraid that this country is being taken away by the left-wing liberals. We see and we hear all of the things that are going on here at WeBelieveDigital.com. It's our job and our opportunity and our commitment to bring you updated information on these important issues as they unfold, and specifically to talk about the role that Mississippi plays in these developing stories. With the President of the United States just recently got passed the anti-inflation bill, which is going to do more for this country than the infrastructure bill did, and hopefully those funds will reach to the places where they need to go. That is in the hands of the struggling American people. In Mississippi, and specifically in Jackson, Mississippi, in the land of plenty, we have food deserts in Jackson, Mississippi, where you can't find decent food and you can't find a place to sit down and eat after 8 o'clock at night. In the capital city of Jackson, you will find food deserts there. So we champion the work that USDA is doing, and we salute Homer Wilkes, the young man that's gone to USDA to take a prominent position in that organization. And we know that his focus will be on the entire country, but he will never forget that he's from Mississippi and that Mississippi has been left out and left behind on so many occasions in the past. So now it's our responsibility to do what we can to level the playing field and to put opportunities in the hands of those that have been systematically denied and continue to be denied as we speak today. There's a lot of trouble in the land on the national scene. The war in Ukraine is just evident of the confusion and the self-hatred that's in the world today. Well, when I look at Russians and I look at the Ukrainians, I can't tell the difference between the two races. They're sisters and brothers. They are absolutely of the same race and the same family. And yet the war in Ukraine is as barbaric and ruthless as anything that we have seen in a long, long time. And what are people fighting about? You must ask yourself, what is everybody afraid of We're going to continue this conversation, but I'm up on a station break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, Keepers of the Knowledge for People Who Speak the Truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Welcome back to News Break. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, from the We Believe Digital Broadcast Studios. We're being seen and heard over 139 countries and throughout the United States of America. You can find us on Roku TV. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. You can reach out to us and share your comments and join this dialogue by dialing 800-492-5186. Go to our website, WeBelieveDigital.com. Hit the donate button, hit the advertise button, and work with us so that we'll be able to continue bringing you programs like this that is designed to make the world aware of the status of African Americans throughout this country and specifically in Mississippi. You know, we've dealt with the national scene for the first half of our program, and per usual, we're now going to talk about some issues in the state and then to the municipal levels during news break. The breaking news on the state side in the state of Mississippi has to continue to be the focus of the expansion of Medicaid. Our governor in the state of Mississippi has denied the expansion of Medicaid to some 300,000 Americans, 300,000 Mississippians. Mississippi, being one of the poorest states in the nation, has turned their back on and turned down the receiving of billions of dollars that would flow into our community. And for every $1 spent on Medicaid, the federal government reimburses $3.4 back to the state of Mississippi, putting billions of dollars into poor people's hands and improving their health care in Mississippi. We need Medicaid expansion more than any other state in the country. And yet our government refuses to accept it, primarily because it was originally called Obamacare. How senseless can that be? Mississippi is a welfare state. For every dollar that we send to Washington, D.C., we get $3 and change back to the state of Mississippi. We receive those dollars and have received them forever. And in fact, the economy of Mississippi is so dependent upon those dollars until if you took the programs out of Mississippi, if you took food stamps out, and you took CHIP out, and you took all of the subsidies that come back from Washington, D.C., it would bankrupt the state of Mississippi in 90 days. So how much hypocrisy does the state want to demonstrate? You don't have the opportunity to turn down assistance from Washington, D.C., Mississippi. You don't have the luxury of that when you have the worst numbers in the world for obesity, for diabetes, infant mortality. There are places in Mississippi where there are no doctors. Not long ago, we lost a young lady. She lost her life during trying to get to a hospital from Greenville, Mississippi to Jackson, Mississippi during the transport. Then she succumbed and passed on, simply because there was no doctor available to them in that area. Mississippi, you cannot turn your back on the expansion of Medicaid. You cannot turn down that much needed subsidy that our state depends on. And just to make matters worse, then we have the audacity in the leadership of this state to turn down the RET program, the rental assistance program, where our governor said that he was going to send the money back to Washington, D.C. because Mississippians were not coming to work. So he didn't want them to have rental assistance because he says they're not coming to work. So he sent the money back to Washington, D.C. And once again, the poorest state in the nation with the highest unemployment rates of any other state in the country, where African Americans make up over 40% of the state of Mississippi, and we live in the poorest state in the nation, and we sent dollars back for rental assistance. Simply because the governor feels that Mississippians are not working, and Mississippians may not be working because of the minimum wage law of $7.25 in this state. And so people work, but they don't have a affordable living. You can work and still be poor in Mississippi. We need affordable wages for our people, and we need all of the assistance that we can get to try to move ourselves off of the bottom. So the governor turns down Medicaid, and he turns down the money from the rental assistance program. And all of this, in my opinion, is race-baited, and it's the essence of why Mississippi has remained last throughout our 200-year existence in America. Mississippi has remained, well, let me back up. At one point during the slavery period, when African Americans were represented, more African Americans in Mississippi than there were Europeans. And Europeans had those plantations, and cotton was king, and they celebrated at the King Edward and the Peabody Hotel up in Memphis, Tennessee, and other major hotels throughout the South, where the South was king because of cotton on the backs of slavery. And so, once again, now we find ourselves just poor, the poorest state in the nation, and Mississippi still tries to keep its foot on the neck of its African-American citizens. We get less than 2% of contracts for goods and services from the state of Mississippi, where we make up over 40% of its population. We get less than 2%. And when we say that we need set-asides for African-American business, our conservative legislators frown at it and say we will not have any set-aside established. They have reluctantly began to say buy local in Mississippi. What Mississippi needs to do, quite frankly, with visionary leadership, is to close its borders and to say that all goods and services are going to be purchased by businesses located in the state of Mississippi. Every engineering contract, every architect contract, every construction contract ought to go to Mississippi-based businesses that are hurting and starving out in this country. And we ought to make it mandatory that all goods and services that African Americans can provide be put on state contract pricing, where state institutions and college and municipalities can order those products and goods and services without going through the notorious unbalanced bid process. Yet we make it so hard. We make it so difficult for the small man to move ahead. And then we have the rhetoric from the famous statement by the previous governor of the state of Mississippi, Haley Barbour, when he says that African Americans ought to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I'm reminded of Martin Luther King's speech when he said, "How can a bootless man pull himself up? How can a bootless man change his condition?" The answer is he cannot. He has to have help and assistance and visionary leadership. Mississippi was at the forefront of the Roe versus Wade overturn, when our state's case was the case that the United States Supreme Court decided to hear, that eventually led to the turnover of Roe versus Wade. And our governor said this was the proudest day of his career when that decision was reversed. and yet we have the worst health care. And if we're going to have this increased number in populations with minimum wage and no health care to provide for these additional babies, it is in fact tantamount to murder. And so murder on the front end during the abortion, or murder on the back end because you cannot provide and can't medically sustain the population, to me is the same thing. We have to have a holistic approach. Let me move on to municipalities. My time is running short. The city of Jackson is in a water crisis and has been in a water crisis now for over 3 weeks. The ability to provide clean drinking water is an essential requirement. He who controls the water will control the economy. It was that way on the banks of the Nile when civilization very began, and that's why it was created on the waterway. Water is essential to sustaining communities. Both business and homes are suffering because we don't have clean drinking water. And let me say on the mayor's behalf, the Mayor Lumumba of Jackson, Mississippi, I feel your pain and I share your passion that you were treated, the city was treated unfortunately when the state of Mississippi sent out its own boil water notice for the citizens of Jackson without notifying or talking to the mayor of this great city. Those kind of actions smack right in the face of you wanting this city to decline. The mayor's got a tremendous challenge on his hand to try to deal with a crumbling infrastructure that has pipes that are over 150 years old. Some of the pipes underground are made out of clay. The distribution system is in disarray. We produce more water than we can distribute to the customers, so somewhere we're losing 30-40% of the water that's produced in old, decaying distribution systems. Yes, we got problems. The municipalities has got problems. We are an African-American city, 85% African-American population with an African-American government consisting of a mayor and city councils, 5 out of 7 being African-Americans. And yet recently, an African-American firm, Richest Disposal Service, was the low bidder for the garbage contract to pick up the garbage from our streets. They were low bidder, saving this city $1.2 million a year, $12 million over a 10-year contract, and African Americans on the city council voted to deny the award of the contract to a black vendor with that kind of savings. At the same time, when they denied the award of the contract, several weeks later, they announced an increase in the fees for garbage service. You turn down the savings and you increase fees. There's some smacks here. There's a rat somewhere in a woodpile in Jackson, Mississippi. Black folk got to learn that they got to stick together, that given an opportunity to promote an African-American firm ought to be priority one. Priority one. We wonder how other races and ethnic groups get ahead is because they support one another. They don't have the division and the self-hatred that we experience with African Americans throughout Mississippi and throughout this country. We got to have visionary leadership at the council level as well as the mayor level that sends them into the back room and talk about the priorities and the needs of the city of Jackson, and come out of that room united, doing the best thing for our community. Create role models. When an African-American firm is chosen to pick up garbage on our contract, not only does he pick up the garbage, but he sends a signal to young African-American boys that they too can have a company one day that can pick up garbage and treat water in our city. It's critically important that we know why we are here and why Martin Luther King and Medgar Evers and Vernon Damon, Fannie Lou Hamer gave their lives so we'd have the opportunity to empower our people and not hold them back, which is what we're doing today. Conditions in Jackson, Mississippi are worse today under African-American leadership than it was under white leadership, and that's sad to say. That's difficult for me to even get out of my mouth. but yet we find ourselves in a deteriorating condition in this city. Now, this has been News Break, and we'll be back with you on this Friday. Until then, stay tuned and have a good evening. Good day.
Advertise on WeBelieve.global, a brand new digital media platform. Share your brand with our audience on our many global live stream TV broadcasts and over the radio. For more info, visit WeBelieve.global or call 800-492-5186, option 1.